So I finally finished the One Piece Skypiea arc, and the thing is, going into this arc, I heard so many different opinions. In fact, it might have been one of the more polarizing arcs I heard opinions on, from, oh my goodness, this is my favorite arc, you're gonna love it, to, this one, it's not so great. Some people even said they hated this arc. I even heard some people say that it was kind of filler to them, which absolutely blows my mind, because how could you watch, especially this moment I'm going to talk about, not even some of the other moments that I've already talked about, the Noland and Kagura backstory. I mean, that was one of the most impactful moments I've seen in all of One Piece. It is currently my favorite backstory, but again, a lot of competition there. One Piece definitely writes some incredibly good backstories. But again, how can you watch some of those moments, or the last moment I talked about, where Luffy fought Eneru, the way he simultaneously broke the gold on his arm, defeated Eneru, and rung the bell? That was one of the best moments I've seen in One Piece. But the thing is, somehow it was topped by even this moment. How could someone watch this moment I'm going to talk about here and be like, oh, that's not easily some of the most important information that's been revealed up to this point in the story? Like, unless I'm just overvaluing how important this information was, which again, I don't think I am, because it feels really important. And the more I think about it, the more I realize, like, I've tried to talk myself down. I realize, okay, this is incredibly important, because you better believe anytime the name Gol D. Roger comes up in the story, oh yeah, I'm gonna pay extra close attention. That's something I've learned. Like, when his name comes up, it's gonna be important, because it almost certainly is. So anyway, to briefly recap what kind of led into the moment I'm going to talk about, Luffy, he rings the bell, defeats Eneru all at the same time. The bell, it falls into the sea. Now they get the bell out, and at this point the Shandian people and everyone is rejoicing because, okay, they got their bell. But the thing is, they quickly realize, like, what is this? You know, they're looking at the poneglyph. And this is where Robin comes in, and quickly, the more and more I think about this moment, I'm not really sure how many people in the One Piece world are more valuable than Robin, because, again, it feels like everything in the story now depends on those poneglyphs, unless I'm reading way too much into that. But again, the fact that Gold Roger is connected, or sorry, Gold D. Roger, which is another thing that I'm wondering about, like, okay, what does a D mean? They keep referencing that, like, they're only hinting at it as of right now. But again, this scene here reinforces, like, okay, these poneglyphs, they're very important to the story. Like, don't look past them. The thing is, I kind of looked past them to a certain extent, not really, but kind of, in Alabasta, because if you really think about it, everything that happened in Alabasta, really basically the entire Alabasta saga, was because of those poneglyphs. Like, our characters didn't even really realize it. In fact, nobody outside of really Robin on the crew cared about poneglyphs at all. But everything that happened in Alabasta was because Crocodile took over Alabasta so he could get his hands on a poneglyph, which the Nefertari family was defending. So obviously they're very important, but if not that, the poneglyph had the location of an ancient weapon, Pluton, which again, like, I'm assuming like a weapon of mass destruction level thing, especially by the way Crocodile described it as, like, yeah, it can obliterate an entire island. I'm thinking like nuclear bomb level stuff. Now, of course, his whole plan was resting on the fact that Robin was just going to tell him what was on it, because obviously she's one of the few people that can read it. Apparently she's not the only one, but Robin was like, yeah, I'm not going to freaking tell you. Do I look like an idiot? Why would I tell you? But she didn't tell him. You know, it didn't go so well. She gives up all hope. And at that point, I'm really realizing that everything that happened there was so much more important to the story than what I had realized before this moment in particular. That's why I'm talking about it. It might feel like I'm going on a tangent, which I am, to be honest. But again, I legitimately feel like that part of the story has so much more relevance now, because she didn't want to live. Her main goal was to find the true history of the world. What happened in the Void Century, you know, this and that. She didn't really care that much about ancient weapons, but she had given up and Luffy saved her. And she was even upset with Luffy, like, leave me here. And he kind of looked at her like, I don't take orders from anyone. I'm a pirate. I'm the captain of the ship. Like, I'm not just anyone. You do understand I want to be king of the pirates, someone who takes orders from nobody. So again, against her wishes, he saves her. And I would kind of like to get more of her thought process of why she decided to then join Luffy's crew. Like, she kind of explained it. Kind of like, hey, you saved me, therefore, like, I'm kind of your responsibility now. I'm gonna join your crew. And she's like the only one that basically told Luffy, like, yeah, I'm joining your crew. Usually he tells them, Like, he doesn't even ask them, he just tells them. If you go and look back, like, he went to Zoro, he's like, hey, you're joining my crew. And Zoro was like, who the flip are you? They really only had like one brief conversation before that, and none of that came up. But Luffy basically decided on his own, and Zoro even got upset, like, why are you deciding? The same thing happened with Nami to a certain extent. I mean, she kind of like reluctantly joined the crew, and then next thing you know, she was part of the crew. Now, to be fair, like, she did run away that little time, but then, you know, she came back. Even though, like, she wanted Luffy to leave, but he was like, screw that, you're my navigator. It's hard to find navigators these days. Then he did the same thing with Sanji, where he's like, okay, I decided you're my cook, and Sanji's like, well, no. And it's like, well, that's too bad, because I already decided, and then, of course, they get, you know, it just goes on and on and on. Chopper, to a certain extent. Really, Usopp was the only one where he was just like, hey, like, you're part of the crew, and he was like, yeah, sure. I don't know, Usopp was the most willing recipient to join. I just went on like a whole tangent that I didn't need to. Anyway, I need to get back to what I was talking about. But she was like, hey, I'm joining your crew, and Luffy was like, yeah, okay, seems about right, which is wild. But now I'm realizing, like, okay, if she doesn't join his crew, and maybe I'm overstating this, if she doesn't join his crew, Luffy doesn't have a shot in hell of finding the One Piece. That's what I've realized, based on this moment here. Because again, Robin starts reading this, and she's like, huh, what is going on here? She realizes, like, okay, it's information on the whereabouts of a weapon, another massive weapon. This one's not Pluton, though. Instead, this weapon is Poseidon, which again, is also kind of interesting. Even the names of these ancient weapons are very, very interesting. But the thing is, she's not happy about this information. She's actually kind of let down, like, oh, just another weapon of mass destruction. Like, I don't want to find these weapons. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the lost history of the world. And she's walking away. She's like, okay, maybe my dream was stupid. You know, I'm never going to find it. I'm never going to learn what actually happened. But thankfully, someone was like, hey, what about that text? And she turns and she looks where someone had inscribed in the same ancient language, which only she was really supposed to know how to read, or at least she's one of the few that are able to read it. And of course, who else? The Gold D. Roger. And he wrote something which, again, is just absolutely crazy, because the implications of that are insane. One, he came up to Skypiea, but two, he found the gold bell, which meant he was probably looking for that gold bell, which is why he came up here. Like, he didn't just wander about and happen to find it. You don't just happen to find this gold bell. It was up in the clouds, and he didn't bother to get it down or anything like that, because again, he doesn't care about the gold bell that much. He only cared about the information on the poneglyph, which you have to assume he only really came up here because he was looking for that gold bell in the poneglyph, which meant this guy probably had such an intricate understanding and knowledge of the history of the world. And you have to also assume, like, okay, why are the poneglyphs so important to him in particular? But then, as Robin started to kind of think things through, it all started to make perfect sense. Because again, he inscribed in this language, which again, I don't really know how he knows this language. The more I learn about him, he almost seems to be a mythical figure. Like, yeah, he knew this ancient language that basically nobody should know. He also did all this crazy stuff, you know, he became the Pirate King. It wouldn't shock me if people were like, oh yeah, one time he stepped too hard and it caused an earthquake. Like, everything is on the table with this guy at this point. He's been everywhere, he's done everything. But Robin is thinking through this, like, I will guide this text to the ends of the earth. Like, wait, like, what does that mean exactly? And she's realizing, like, oh my goodness. Okay, so all the text is so much more important than even she was realizing. And in that moment, she realizes, like, okay, so if she got all the text from all the poneglyphs, she would form what she's been looking for, the Rio Poneglyph. If you put all the text together, it would make this Rio Poneglyph that still doesn't exist. And the thing is, that would have the information on the true history of the world, what happened. And the thing is, when I was hearing that, I was thinking, well, you know, it's tied to Gold D. Roger, these mysterious poneglyphs with hidden information that only a few people can even read, let alone if you gather all the information. But it's like, okay, it's almost like there's all these little clues, and then when you put them together, it's almost like they have something, some massive piece of information. And that's when I realized they all but certainly help you find the final island. They help you find Raftel. Because there has to be, like, a legitimately good reason why no one's been able to find this island. At least no one that I know of outside of Roger himself. It can't be a place that you just happen upon by chance, or a place that you can just go to by just continuing on and everyone should be able to get there, because why has no one been able to go to the final island? Or maybe they have been able to go to the final island, but just because you can go doesn't mean you can find whatever this One Piece is, which, you know, there is the possibility it's nothing, but I have to assume that, like, these clues, these poneglyphs, so to speak, have hidden clues within them that kind of help you on your journey, because it would make perfect sense that a big part of the reason no one's been able to find it is because, well, one, you need to know this language, two, you need to find the poneglyphs, and some of them are in crazy places like up in the sky. Now, I do admit I could be way off base here, but at the same time, like, this just seems fairly logical to me. Like, I don't know what the One Piece is. I'm starting to think it's just like the sum of a whole bunch of information, like some almost like world-ending threat level information or something like that. Like, it just being gold and silver and, you know, like that, jewels would be boring at this point. It needs to be something of true significance and importance. And really, what has more importance than lost information? Like, you think of even in our world when, you know, the Great Library of Alexandria was burnt down. Like, that is one of the biggest travesties. Or you look at like Tesla, when one of his labs was burnt down, the amount of information that was probably lost. Because again, like, Tesla was a guy who was thinking of like the internet way before people were, and all sorts of stuff. This whole scene here just kind of reignited one of the things I love so much about One Piece, which is the world building. And I know people talk about like, oh, One Piece has great world building, so it's not like I'm saying anything new, but again, like, this here is a masterclass in world building, because it's like, okay, lost history. You even go back to the Shandians, and they were protecting this poneglyph. And the thing is, this information had to get to where it was supposed to go. And Roger found the information, and Robin realized, okay, he all but certainly took it to where it was supposed to go, to the ends of the earth. And what does that mean? You gotta take it to the end of the Grand Line, Raftel, where they believe the One Piece is. So again, all of this with the poneglyphs, it's all pointing to the One Piece. It's all pointing to the final island. So, like, the importance of this, like, the more and more I think about it, the more significant it becomes. Like, I kept trying to talk myself down, like, maybe I'm just reading way too much into this kind of stuff. But again, maybe it was also reigniting a lot of the stuff I love to do. Like, I have a passion for history and archaeology, and I just love going down rabbit holes and speculating, like, you know, watching all those videos on, you know, like what happened to Atlantis, and, you know, we have clues of maybe what people were talking about with this ancient civilization, you know, things like that in our world. And the more I see this, it's like, okay, Oda really thought all this through. The world building is immaculate. This was stuff that all of Alabasta was really about, but it wasn't at the forefront. It was under the surface. And then this arc really laid the groundwork for that even more. And you even go back to Jaya, which again, I didn't even make like a really good video on Jaya. I mean to actually go back now that I know this and actually look at like what happened in Jaya a lot more. But yes, the world building was immaculate. Even when I think of what really got me sold on One Piece, it was back in the Baratier. A lot of people say like they really get sold on One Piece at Arlong Park. That's when it gets really good. Some people say it's even further at Alabasta. I think those people are kind of crazy. I think it gets extremely good right from the Baratier. Granted, there's probably people out there who are like, yeah, it was good almost from the jump, or maybe from the jump. But aside from two backstories in that arc, Zoro and Sanji's, I love the backstories. It was really how they built up the intrigue in that arc in particular, and how they used this one guy that they built up, Don Krieg, and they were like, okay, this is the strongest pirate crew in the East Blue. And he comes back a totally broken man because he took his fleet of 50 ships into the Grand Line, and one guy, one Dracul Mihawk, one of the 7 warlords, took him out, which then it just opens up so many questions like, okay, the warlords, Dracul Mihawk, okay, how many power players are out there? Who exactly are the other warlords? Are there other like wildly dangerous people outside of the warlords? Like, what is going on in the Grand Line? Anyway, it just opened up so many more questions. This moment here was like that times 10. But again, this moment was big. It just gets better and better the more I think about it. So Robin, with all this information, she's like, okay, she tells the Shandians, your job is done. This information got where it was supposed to go. But I've meant to even say with the Shandians, when you think about it, they were trying to protect the poneglyph in a city of gold, I repeat. The thing that they valued was protecting the poneglyph, and to an extent the bell. But the poneglyph itself, which meant like, okay, whatever information was on it, which now we know it was the whereabouts of this weapon Poseidon, was so valuable that they were protecting it. But I think the craziest part about it is that they said the ancient city of Shandora fought and fell to protect this poneglyph, which meant they lost. They didn't win. So does that mean the bad guys won, the good guys won? Like, who really knows? It's probably a very gray situation where it's not all like, okay, are they all good or bad? Maybe it's just competing ideologies. Like, one group of people wanted to make sure nobody got this information because it's like, okay, this is potentially world-ending stuff. And the other group of people were like, no, we need this information. It's so incredibly valuable. It's almost like that fight between progress and then also like, okay, are we pushing the limits too much? You know, you look at stuff with like AI now and things like that. So there's always these conflicts going on. And I wonder if it was just like two competing ideologies. Not like, okay, it was only good people and bad people on both sides. Just they kind of had their disagreements and then like one side won and the other side lost. You have to imagine that like a lot of the kingdoms left around, they were the ones that won. But the thing is, to an extent, I do wonder if it's more so like, okay, yeah, maybe it is just as cut and dry as the bad guys won. The people that shouldn't have won, and then they destroyed information. They destroyed what happened. It's like, why do you have to hide what happened so much in the Void Century? But you have to assume that's really the purpose of Luffy's crew at this point now. And Robin all but says that. Like, okay, Roger took this information to the ends of the earth. I gotta do the same thing with all the poneglyphs I find. I've got to put together the Rio Poneglyph. So she knows I've got to take this information to the end of the Grand Line, to Raftel, which again is where we're supposed to be heading. So her dream perfectly aligns with Luffy's dream of finding the One Piece, because you have to assume if you put together the Rio Poneglyph by connecting all the poneglyphs, you've probably also found the One Piece, because they're probably, I don't want to say like exactly the same thing, but basically the same thing. And even when you think of great treasure hunts, like, okay, the One Piece is this great treasure that's out there. You have to put together all the clues and then head to where the clues tell you. And what do I think are the clues in this world? It's whatever is written on those poneglyphs, and if you put them together, you know exactly where the One Piece is, and you know all of this valuable information, like what happened in the Void Century and all sorts of stuff, which again, made me speculate like so much on what is the One Piece? Like, what is it exactly? Because Roger, you have to assume he put together all of this information. It wasn't just this. He probably found every single poneglyph, and he probably took it all to the final island. So maybe it's just all the information of what happened in the Void Century. Maybe it's all the information of every single thing in this world. Like, I don't know. Now, I did want to make note of this one particular scene because it has a lot of implications, but especially when Gunfall turns to Robin, because he was listening in and he heard the name Roger, and he remembers this pirate that came up here 20 years ago. Now, of course, he doesn't know much about the King of the Pirates, but he particularly remembers Roger, and he remembers him well enough that he tells Robin, like, hey, that Straw Hat captain of yours, he reminds me of Goldie Roger. Like, they have so many similarities, which isn't a shock. They've made that parallel at so many points during the story. But the reason I wanted to kind of bring it up now is it really highlights how perfect of a pairing it is between Robin and Luffy. Even during this entire arc, Robin was kind of coming to grips with the fact that it seemed like her dream was dead. Like, she wanted to die in Alabasta, Luffy saved her, she joined his crew. Again, I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about why she decided to join the crew, because I kind of wanted to see if maybe she saw something in Luffy, like, okay, he could be a great pirate one day. Now, she joins Luffy's crew, and immediately, her first adventure with the crew, they go up into the sky, a place many people don't even know exists, but yet, it's perhaps the most important place for Robin to go, at least in that moment. Because not only did she quickly realize, like, oh, my dream isn't dead. Again, she joined Luffy's crew, and immediately, she learns some pretty valuable stuff. She finds the ancient city of gold. Of course, the gold was gone, but she found Shandora. And yet better than even that, she of course found this bell, which contained the poneglyph, which she got to translate. And that was when she realized, like, oh, I understand what I have to do now. I fully understand what my objective is. My dream, it's not dead. I'm going to live out my dreams. And Luffy is the man who's going to help me do that. Of course, Luffy and some of the other crew but, you know, Luffy's the captain. But even more so, the reason I think that they're such a perfect pairing is that neither of them would be able to achieve their dreams without the other. I mentioned the fact that I don't think Luffy would ever have a chance of getting even close to the One Piece if Robin didn't join his crew. But on the other hand, Robin wouldn't have much of a chance of getting her dream done because, again, there's no chance or very little chance she ever would have gone into the sky. Not to mention, well, Luffy did save her. But even after that point, if she just went about on her own, yeah, without Luffy, she doesn't have a chance of getting her dream done, of actually fulfilling her dream, of collecting all these poneglyphs, forming the Rio Poneglyph, and discovering what is the lost history, and putting it all together to understand the full history of the world. So again, these two both need each other, and I wanted to highlight that this moment kind of reinforced how important Robin is to the crew, but also how important the crew is to Robin. But this moment here, perfect, great for the world building, because it just opens up so many questions, but also makes me realize how intricately Oda really thought out all of the past. And again, I'm very excited again. Like, there was definitely a portion during this arc where I even stopped watching for a bit, because I was like, another episode where they have to fight the ball priest guy, Satori. Yeah, I don't really want to do that. So I stopped watching for a bit, but thankfully I got to the end, and the way this arc closed, brilliant. I actually mean to put together like a whole very good review of this arc. Major themes, obviously not really over talking about the stuff I've already talked about. But anyway, what do you think about this? Obviously no spoilers, but if you want to see more, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.